My name is Fernando Figueroa, and I'm the Provost at Del Mar College in Corpus Christi, and we are filming this in Corpus Christi to have some conversations about an idea or a thought that has been percolating in my mind for probably 15, 20 years, and it comes around one basic question: is why does higher education, of all things, seem to be so amazingly resistant to change? And you know, when we look at the way our society has changed over the last 5 years, much less the last 15 years, every sector of the economy, every sector of our culture has gone through massive shifts. Some people would argue that government's the last, refuge where this is going to happen, but even in government, there are profound changes. And the majority of those changes seem to come from the fact that information, which was once used to be, cloistered in certain buildings or certain locations, is now everywhere. And that, it's as simple as if you have a conversation with someone or a question about something at a dinner table, what you do is you pull out your device and say, okay, instead of having a question that I can't answer, I just look it up and who was in such and such a movie in 1986, and were they in fact in that 1999 movie, and you can figure all that out in a period of 2 minutes, and then you can go on with your life and your steak dinner. And that's happened to me quite a few times where we used to get stuck with questions, now we can find information and answers. And so then, since colleges and universities are all about information and information transfer and knowledge transfer, it does seem to be unusual that our sector, of all the sectors, should be so resistant to the technologies and to the changes. And I became really aware of this at a conference at Abilene Christian University. They have an annual conference, an international conference on e-learning. And one of the speakers there had been working with software and teaching software for over a decade, and was working with Pearson. And one of the questions one of his thesis statement basically was, we've had the software for 10 plus years in teaching and learning and doing math and doing English, and he was particularly focused on developmental and remedial math and English. And he said, with all the software, why is it that all we're doing with online learning, all we're doing with technology, is putting everything we know into a PDF? We convert our knowledge, we convert our lecture notes, we convert our face-to-face into a PDF document, and then we move on, as if that somehow is the translation. And the challenge that people, at Del Mar College know, when I talk to them, is the first thing I look at is the syllabus. What have we done with the syllabus? The syllabus would not be unusual. The way we have it designed today would not be unusual to Geoffrey Chaucer in 1300 AD. It's simply a listing of items in a certain order, and a schedule and a calendar, and then here are the learning outcomes you're going to have. And usually, the mantra is, the first day of class is a waste of time, right? Because they're going to hand out the syllabus and send you on your way. And so, a lot of those different things coming together made me think about mythology. And, I have a literature background, and, I'm very, very keyed into Joseph Campbell. And the idea of archetypes and mythology is that there are these key stories that kind of undergird how and why we organize ourselves in our culture. Why is it that we have families the way we do? Why is it that we have, the economies the way that we do? That when you look deep down in all of that, there are certain stories that undergird that, and they tend not to be questioned. And so every group, every culture has these kind of mythologies. And, Joseph Campbell warns that if you do not inspect your myths, if you don't challenge and look at what's underneath those myths, then what you'll do is simply replicate them without ever questioning. And they will drive you instead of you driving them. They will determine what is right and wrong. They will determine who is friend and who is enemy. They will determine who is home and who is alien. All of those kinds of stories are underneath the way that we design our enterprises. And so, as I was looking at higher education, there were the three main myths that came to my mind about why we seem to be so resistant to change. And the first is the content rules. The idea that from the beginning, if knowledge was a series of data points, and they were hard to collect, and you put them in monasteries, or you put them in universities in Heidelberg, Germany, and you had your one location where all those facts were. And up until about 1800, you could fit Western European knowledge, all the data points, in a series of books in a room about this size. I mean, think about that. Now you can have the entire Library of Congress and it doesn't take all of the space, all the data space that's available here. And so when data was hard to come by, of course, then content was king. But as we've learned over the last couple of years, a lot of research has come about the affective elements of learning. That things like nutrition can make a huge difference in the ability of a person to learn. The sleep deprivation, or not, can make a huge difference. Relationships make a huge difference. The way that students relate to the institution, the way that they relate to the people that they interact with, whether it's a staff member, whether it's a faculty member, whether it's an administrator, and the relationship they have to the knowledge, to the content itself. So it's not that content has ceased to matter, and my colleagues will consistently challenge me on that. It's that if content was this important, and it used to be considered that everything else that went around it was about this important, now it's at least as important, if not in some cases more important. And we're finding in underrepresented constituencies, in our Latino and African American populations, that the connections, the groupings, the way that people feel connected and home in a certain institution with the people in that room can make all the difference in persistence and retention and their success. If they don't feel like they belong, they're out of there. And in the community college world, we see that every day. We see people in the parking lot trying to make the decision in their heads, do I go in and even register? Do I even dare say that I could be a college student? And all of those factors are in play that interfere with learning and the distribution of content. So if we try to be as simplistic, and I think one of the myths that we have is everything is based on content. What's your thesis? What's the content in your thesis? What's your dissertation? What's your specialization? What's your major? And in a world where, now they're saying 9 to 12 career changes, not job changes, career changes in a lifetime, what's your major is almost, who cares, right? What do you know? And so then graduate schools, gradually graduating to graduation, and you'll know I like to play with language, is that the way we're training the folks that eventually become professors and administrators and student service folks is kind of focusing again and again and again on the content. And then we say, okay, what do we know about learning, or how to design learning experiences? How do we take learning so that, like the syllabus, how do you convert the data points on the syllabus to the relationships of the experiences? How do you take, okay, here's what we're going to learn, to here's how we're going to learn it, and then how we're going to verify learning, which is where the whole assessment move, has also had its issues. Because again, the mythology is, I just test them. If you just do, questions 7, 10, and 12, and they get the right answers on 7, 10, and 12, that means they've learned. Okay? And so what do we do as far as teaching learning? That's about it. Now, if you have an EDD, right, or you go through a Master's of Education or a Doctorate of Education, you will get information on that. But it's such a small slice of the academy that it has very little impact overall. And then people who are in education tend to be in early childhood or developmental reading, English, and math. And as I'm going to talk about, there are issues with the boxes then that we put the kinds of learning, where the PhD is up here and developmental is considered to be down there. And in a community college, we really challenge with that because we want to say that all our students are capable. All our students are exceptional at learning. And if we don't understand that about learning, learning is the most natural thing we do. We're switched on learning. We learn how to feed ourselves. We learn how to, make people do what we want them to do, right, as a kid. Right? We do that. And that develops and grows through time. We learn how to put blocks together. We learn how to walk by falling. We don't say, oh, that's it, I'm done. Right? Get my credential. Can I have my credential now? I've learned to walk. Right? We don't do that. We take learning as a very natural thing, and then we create the classroom. And all of a sudden, learning becomes something different. And that's where, we're really running into issues with how we put learning in boxes. I have a 16-year-old and 18-year-old. Oops, covered the microphone. 16-year-old and 18-year-old. They are always learning. My 16-year-old is into jazz, not an easy discipline. Spends hours and hours and hours trying to work out, John Coltrane improvisations on the piano and write them down. But he will use Spark Notes to write his essay on the book that he was supposed to have read. Okay. Disconnect? Maybe so. My older son will spend hours problem solving a game. He loves video games, and he will spend hours upon hours trying to problem solve through that game, through the different levels, and it never ends, and he's never, you kind of have to get that to that save point, and he goes on and on and on. So why is it that these folks, and we all know them, right? Millennials as well as adults that will spend hours and hours and hours on something that they're engaged in, that they care about, that they want to do, but they will phone it in for something that's in a box. And look at the boxes. From course to contact hour to credit hour to office hour to buildings to semester to degree plan to credentials. And then on the faculty side, you've got load, rank, tenure, policy, academic freedom, departments, disciplines. All of these are in boxes. It is rare still on college campuses today for departments to talk to each other, even within their larger categories of humanities or their larger categories of fine arts. They tend to put themselves in a box and say, no, that's my department over here, that's your department over there. And in our degree plans, we've got your core curriculum or your general education parts that are usually located in departments, but they're supposed to be that part of the degree. And then there's the majors, which are the ones we supposedly care about, right, within our major and departments. Well, then a miracle occurs, obviously, when someone takes all those courses in whatever order they take them in and whenever they finish it, and boom, you have an educated person. There's no intentional pathway. There's no sense of connectedness. There's no conversation among the different departments or disciplines, and we're starting to do that at Del Mar. We're having conversations about our core curriculum to bring everybody to the table in student services, in instructional, all across the board, because everybody's part of the context of learning. Everybody's part of the educational experience. And if we're intentional about it, then it's not a black box. It's not a miracle occurred. We are able to say, this is how we intend it to be used. This is how our students are going to be able to find their pathway. And when they don't, then we can assess where the breakdown happens. And we can be much more intentional. But if they're in boxes, and if you're familiar with teaching English Composition 1 and Composition 2, you often find, I did when I was teaching, that you started 1302 and you said, or what, English Composition 2, and you said, what did you learn in English Composition 1? Crickets, right? Because it had an end date, had an expiration date like your milk. It must be used by such and such a date. And then the date passes, you've got your grade, you close the book, put it over here, it was a nice experience, and then you start the next experience and a whole new context, whole new professor, whole new series of relationships, and you have to learn it all over again. And the research is showing that transfer of knowledge from one course to another in sequence is not happening, much less what you're learning in HVAC applying to what you're learning in history or sociology, and vice versa. And then how does all of that, all those educational experiences come together? What about the workshops? Right? You're having a student success center and you have these workshops. If they are seen as a box that has a beginning, middle, and end, then the students don't see how that's connected with everything else that they're doing. If admissions doesn't tell them something about their learning experience, right? If registration doesn't tell them about their learning experience, if the wayfinding, and our institution has to deal with that too. In Del Mar, we've got, we're working on wayfinding. Why? Because if a student can find his or her way across the campus, it says that we've designed it appropriately. If they can't, then what does that say about how we're designing our experiences for our students? And I've got to move. I've got to go a few more minutes here. And here's the biggest box of all, the classroom. Just look at that and tell me what that says to you. It says knowledge flows one way. Knowledge flows to the board. And you hope there's someone there, right? They're talking, and it flows from that central point, and then you're in rows. So all of that seems to say And this usually happens when you're in 3rd grade. Right? Up until then, you're in kindergarten or pre-kindergarten, and there's zones, and there's colors, and there's books, and you get to kind of organize your learning the way that you are most comfortable and natural with. And then we put you in the mass production box. Sit down, shut up, behave. If you're a good student, right, then you learn how to play the game. Doesn't mean you're necessarily learning anything. It just means you've been enculturated. You know how to sit down, take notes, do your tests, fulfill your obligations, do your punch card, get through your class, get your graduation because you're going to get a bachelor's degree, and then you're done. But that's not reality. Reality does not come in neat packages. Right? You don't turn 30 and then suddenly you're an adult. Right? It's a series of surprises. And life nowadays with technology and all the evolutions that we're going through is becoming more and more of a surprise every day. The majors that we have today are going to be irrelevant in 5 years. There's great work and professions that are going to happen in 5 years that we have no clue about today. And yet, the spaces that we design for learning say there's an entry point, which is the same as the exit point, and everything flows in one structured way. So unconsciously, we're setting that up. And if you ever want to get a feel for how unconscious that is, put people in a room where there's furniture on wheels, where you can move the tables. And it's a miracle. And we're taping this in a room where that's possible. And it's always fun to watch people's eyes light up. It's like, oh, wait a second. It's possible to change within 5 minutes the entire configuration of the room, which changes the dynamics and the relationships. Again, the context becoming important. How and why we use the information and how we share it, and it becomes meaningful to us, rather than these are a set of data points that I'm supposed to memorize, learn, and even if you're learning in the context of a certain matrix, it's still not real to you until you're using it, until it becomes part of who you are. The other myth that is led to from this idea that learning happens in boxes is that there can only be one. There's only one expert, one person in the room that knows everything. Right? Are you the teacher? Many times when I first got out of graduate school, are you the teacher? I still look pretty young then. And those days are long gone. Are you the teacher? And then it was like, okay, yes, I am. Okay, what do you want us to do? Right? Up until the moment in which I was identified as professor or teacher or instructor, I was just a person that was learning along with them. But then I stood up, I had a marker in my hand, I started writing on the board, and bammo, I was the source of all compliance. Because it's not so much, what can you teach me, what can I learn, so much as, what do I need to do to get an A in this class? Because there can only be one. And this is the dynamic that we set up. The professor is the content master. The student is content slave. I have to receive it, I have to do what you say. You say that the test has 10 questions. I can't say, no, it should have 15 questions. And the questions should be a little different. No, you don't understand. I'm the professor. I'm the one who sets the regulations. And you read that in the syllabus, by the way, which you signed in, right. We didn't co-author that one. One's a grader. What's your cut of meat? What's your quality of individual? And I get to do that because someone credentialed me to say professor. And so I get to grade, and the student has to just take it. And you in student services dealing with complaints from students, that's usually one of the things, is that my point of view was not taken into account. I didn't have any say in how this got created. Teachers always standing, students usually sitting. Talking versus taking dictation, questioning versus trying to get the password, right? That question-answer thing that we do that we think is so very, Socratic, usually there's an answer there, and the student's going, what answer do you want? Just tell me what you're looking for. I'll give it to you. Because after 2 or 3 of, no, well, just tell me. Just tell me and we can get on with this. If it's a data point you're looking for, just tell me. Or I'll look it up online and tell you whether you got it right or not. Right? I'll go do Wikipedia on it. And then so, and that's a very feudal system, because when did universities come about? During the feudal era. Right? And then here's why professors do this. Here's why administrators do this. Because we've cut ourselves up into this second-class citizen, third-class citizen situation. You know, there's a lot of debates over adjuncts and contingent faculty and tenure-track faculty and non-tenure-track faculty and tenured faculty and all of this other conversation, and administration and the levels of administration versus faculty. And all of it has to do with the fact that this is at the heart of the mythology. There can only be one. And so why do universities and colleges exist? Professors will tell you so that we can do our thing. Students might have a different answer. Administrators might have a different answer. But within the ranks, and all you need to do is go to the Chronicle of Higher Education and read about the woundings of the tenure patrols, right? And people, one of the most touching articles I ever was the person who went to post-tenure depression, PTD. They got tenure and then wondered, what have I attached my wagon to? So those are questions that we have to deal with. If we're full of experts, if higher ed is full of experts and everyone has a credential that says, I am an expert, no wonder we're not talking. And we have, again, the mythologies of what academic freedom means, academic responsibility. It's not a corporate idea. It's not an idea of coming together. It's an idea that I got my credential, I get to teach my class the way I want to do it. I get to do my discipline, my course, without any sense of how that course or that educational experience interacts with the other boxes that that student has to deal with and work through. And so then it's like, okay, I got them through my box, now you get them through their box. And then, if, you know, and then we do this pointing thing too. You should have taught them how to write. You should have taught them how to do math or read. Once they come to me prepared, I can do my job. And no wonder, because again, if I'm the expert, I know what kind of student is good, I know what kind of student is not good. And I've got the paper on the wall to show it. But how real is that? You know, if you're thinking that you're the expert, then you're the innovation that you've been asking for. So however much technology happens, no matter how much software happens, it's perceived as a threat, because if I'm not the expert, then why do you need me? And I had that question asked of me by a very good faculty member who cares a lot about his students. And he asked that question. If students can learn on their own, or if the new software can get them to a point where they can really engage with learning in a game kind of environment, or just that it works, we can show that it works. Why do you need me? We need you to be the designers for the educational experiences, because you know how the pieces and parts work for you, and then you can help translate for students. And relationships is the bottom line. You know, it's a cliche to say it, they don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And you show that care as a faculty member, as an administrator, as student services, by how you design those experiences for the users. Does it make them comfortable? Does it make them uncomfortable in a way that's going to challenge them rather than shut them down? All of those kinds of questions are part of the deal. So how does change happen? Well, it's already happening. We are completely outmaneuvered in higher education today. We just don't know it yet. From everything from the uncollege movement and then the Khan Academy, the software tsunami, the gamification of higher education, the national demographics, this last downturn in the economy turned ugly for higher education. I have never heard people, as they did in Wisconsin, say, how is it that higher education went from being a public good to a public detriment? That was hurting the economy, that was hurting the budget, the state budget, that it was supporting educators that was a problem. When that happens, it tells you there's been a profound shift. And then we're looking at the student debt crisis. And students are asking, and everybody seems to be asking now, is college education worth it? And they're doing this weird thing of, okay, earnings over life, as if that is the marker of a degree, right? The value of a degree, the value of the experience or the educational experience. And oftentimes the debate goes around the college experience at Ivy League or residential type of campuses. When in the community college movement, very few of us are residential. A lot of us have to deal with commuter students and students that come, stop out, and we have to deal with very many different kinds of economic and social situations. Well, for us, this is giving a lot of us issues. And then the fact that if they can get information everywhere, then how is it that we make a position for ourselves to say, but come here and experience it with us, so that it will help you navigate your life? Because your life is not going to be predictable. Your life is not going to have a major with a career that you're going to work for 40 years, you're going to retire, and then everything's great. Your life is going to have a lot of uncertainty. And so then how are you going to navigate that uncertainty? Information literacy then takes a different approach. Financial literacy, health literacy. These are all kinds of knowledge bases that we've never taken seriously into consideration in degree plans, and yet they're absolutely essential to the educated citizenry that we claim that we want in higher education. And so this is a powerful myth. These three myths are in competition with this, and I'm betting on this. Unless we get busy. We really start looking at our myths and create new myths, because you can't kill myths unless you create new ones. You have to have new heroes. You have to have your Vincent Tintos come forward, and you have to have, you know, your Terry O'Banions, and you have to have, you know, all these, you know, again, the new heroes that are going to come through the new mythologies. And this is just a sense that I put together, a sevenfold pathway to the refit of higher education. And, you know, just in a nutshell, it's basically having obsessive attention to students. And what are the talents that we need today in our folks? We have the talents that we have. Are they enough? We need to look at that. We need to look at the designs that we put together, not just instructional, but how does instructional support student services? And how do we kind of use categories and boxes for what they really are intended for, which is to help us organize, help us put resources behind certain categories, but not to believe that when there's a line on the map that separates China from Russia, we don't go looking for that line, right, on the ground. The Sabine River does separate Texas from Louisiana. It does. But then we don't go looking for the line, the little red dotted line. I'm from Louisiana. So, you know, ruthless commitment to creative self-destruction. How do we challenge our own ideas even as we're creating them? That we don't become enamored of them. One of the things when we built this space, the fourth floor here with the different furniture and the technologies, and just went crazy with it, I had people saying, okay, but we're close to being done, right? We're never going to be done. We don't want to ever be done. If we're ever done, we're done. So thank you very much for your attention and your patience here. This is my contact information. If you have any interest in the refit or discussing the refit further, there's my email information as well as the blog. And when you get this on the video, I'm sure it'll come out larger. But I have a blog called The Remarkable Refit of Higher Education. And it's just an opportunity to kind of share these ideas and play around with them so that we keep it fresh. Because if we do not create our own myths, then Bill Gates and others will say this is how it's going to be. And I would rather that we do it from our experiences and our heart in higher education from inside than by having other people kind of give us the myths. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.